You're watching SeekTV. Well, welcome back to SeekTV, and this is our question and answer session. And we've got a question from a viewer in South Carolina. Just curious, the Bible speaks a lot, especially in the New Testament, about the end of the age. I have heard many different beliefs about when the end of the age is, but none of the explanations I have heard point out the obvious one, December 21st, 2012, when our sun will be in a position in the solar system that it reaches only every 26,000 years. Do you think it is possible that could be the end of the age that was spoken of? Also, if the deluge, that is, the Great Flood, changed the features or rotation of the Earth, and the last time our galaxy was lined up like it will be on that day was at the commencement of the Ice Age, are we now in store for the Fire Age? The ancient Egyptians predicted that the earth would be destroyed once with water and once with fire after all, as well as some Roman Christians. Alright, thank you for that question. That's a great question. So what does Christianity say about the end of the age? Well, the New Testament does use this terminology, the end of the age, several times. 5 times in the book of Matthew. Matthew 13:39 says, "The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels." Matthew 13:49 says, "So it will be at the end of the age, the angels will come forth, separate the wicked from among the just." Matthew 24:3 says, "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives," that is Jesus, "the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?'" Matthew 28:20 says, "Teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Amen." And I missed one, that's Matthew 13, verse 40. "Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age." Now I think what you'll find in each of these verses is that this terminology, the end of the age, is actually associated with the very, very end. Okay, so it doesn't really leave room for there to be, in my opinion, in my reading of it, it doesn't really leave room for there to be an age, kind of like a fire age or something like that, before what is called the end of the age. So no, I do not think that the fire age and the end of the age are the same thing. Now, if you're asking if the end of the age is referring to the end of the fire age, I don't know. I'm sorry, that's probably not a very satisfying answer. However, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with these, ages which, astronomy or scientists have for the history of the Earth. I know that astrologists have their ages as well. I'm really not familiar with astrology at all. So, I really can't say about ages, and I don't think your question was actually coming from the perspective of astrology there, just to clarify. So what about December 21st, 2012? Is this possibly the end of the age referred to in the Bible? Well, I don't think that December 21st, 2012 is the end of the age referred to in the Bible. And the reason why is from the scriptures that we just read. The end of the age is actually associated with the return of Jesus Christ to the earth and the angels and gathering the Christians and separating the wicked from the just of the earth's population. So throughout the scriptures, this is spoken of as being at the very end. And so Jesus gave us signs leading up to that time that he said would have to occur. And we're still looking for a lot of these signs to happen. And some of these things are not things which happen overnight. They're not things which happen in just a year. I mean, we're actually still looking for the 7-year tribulation to begin. So obviously, December 21st, 2012 is just a little over a year away. So I don't know if that helps to answer that. But my answer to that would be no. I don't think personally, from reading the scriptures, that December 21st, 2012 is the end of the age. And I would also caution about setting a specific date, day and hour. We just had an example of this with Harold Camping, the radio preacher who put out a date and hour, and a lot of people were following his teaching, and they spent their life savings and things like this. And obviously the date that he set, I think it was May 21st, it came and it went and nothing happened. He said that a worldwide earthquake was supposed to occur and the dead would be raised from the grave, and he was speaking about this quite literally. And then after it all went down, he was very confused. He said he didn't know what happened, and maybe he miscalculated or something like that. But then I think he changed his story, and he just basically spiritualized the whole thing and said that, well, all of that happened, but it was just spiritual. So I mean, it was just a total shift of the understanding of what he had been saying. So we have to be very cautious about false teachers and presuming that we know more than is actually given in the scriptures themselves. So, with that said, though, Jesus did encourage the Christians in the last days to discern the season. Okay, so a day and an hour is very different from the season. And so he even used the example of the fig tree, and he said that when it's put forth leaves, that summer is near. And so there's certain signs that we're looking for, and when they begin to occur, we know that the end of the age is very, very near. Perhaps even just within a decade or a couple decades. So, we're going to be talking about prophecy, and so tune in again for the answer to that. Alright, but something else kind of to answer your question. The Bible does talk about the earth being purged by fire. So, one example of this is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, which says, "The present heavens and earth have been reserved for fire." And it's talking about judgment, the judgment of the wicked. So, and this is repeated throughout the scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament. So, certainly the Christian perspective is that the earth is going to be purged by fire, and the creation is going to be restored. Now, Jesus did say that a lot of unprecedented catastrophes were going to happen, or are going to happen rather, before his return. So, could December 21st, 2012 usher in some major worldwide catastrophes? Possibly, sure. Maybe so. I don't know if 2012 will be the year. I can't say. I don't, personally, base my view on the Mayan calendar. As far as I'm concerned, they could be correct about catastrophes happening that year, but as far as I know, they could be incorrect as well. So I personally don't know, I do think it's pretty neat if it's true what I'm reading, that you know, the galactic alignment that you talked about in your question. I do think it's pretty neat that they would maybe be able to predict something like that. And actually that leads into a very interesting topic, and you mentioned it in your question, that the ancient Egyptians and the Romans predicted that the earth would be destroyed once by water and once by fire. Now what's interesting about such a prediction is that Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian, actually records in the Jewish tradition someone many years before the Egyptian civilization who predicted this. And actually it was the first man, Adam. And so in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 2, Section 3, speaking of Adam's prediction, he says that the prediction was that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water. Now this is very interesting because the Bible says the Bible records the same thing, that God has given prophets to humanity since the world began. And we actually have the example of Enoch, specifically mentioned in the book of Jude, who was a prophet. And here in Josephus we have the Jewish tradition recording prophecies by even Adam himself. So this, I think, is very significant, and it presents a lot of it has a lot of explanatory power for the predictions that we see later on in developing civilizations, from the Sumerians to the Egyptians to the Romans to the Persians and so forth, through all subjects: astronomy, religion, etc. So, you know, we see in those civilizations certain really stunning predictions and similarities and things like this. And the common way that scholars explain this is that you know, it was simply borrowed from one civilization to another, and then as time goes by, the Jewish tradition borrowed it, and then the Christian tradition borrowed it. And so that the Christian tradition is basically just an evolved form of these older myths. Well, what this would suggest is that from the very beginning there was a tradition that humanity had, which civilizations later on adapted in their own way. And so rather than Christianity being evolved from these certain of the ancient civilizations, the very traditions and myths of these ancient civilizations themselves were kind of knockoffs or evolved forms of a much earlier pure or single line of religious astronomical tradition. So that's very significant because, you know, it has a lot of explanatory power for what we see in the historical record and the Egyptian and the Roman record as well about these two predictions. So I would suggest that that is the correct understanding of where they got those predictions from, that was actually passed down. So that was a great question. Thank you so much for sending it in, and that question actually came from my brother in South Carolina. So thank you, Larry, for sending in the first question and helping out the program. Alright, well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and send in your questions to SeekTV@gmail.com, SeekTV@gmail.com, and I'll be answering them in the order that I get them, and I'm really looking forward to the interaction. And as you can see with this, it's just you know, reading the question, talking about it, and we can even continue the conversation if you would like. You know, write back and we'll talk more about it. So thanks for watching, everybody, and this is SeekTV, and I'll see you next time.